Hi, everybody. Joe Cioffi here. Weather in 5 days in 5 minutes. It's all about severe weather this evening, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, a rare Friday night appearance. And we'll also talk about the really nice weather for Father's Day weekend and the heat wave that gets underway on Monday of next week. So tune in tonight at 7:35 for the weekend and week ahead outlook on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And as we take a look at what's happening this afternoon, we still have flood watches in South Florida, as there's still some rain going on there in some areas, but I think the worst of it is behind them, and they are going to start to see some improvement. And we've got heat advisories and excessive heat warnings in the Southwest. And interestingly enough, we have winter storm watches up for western Montana for a big, deep trough that's coming into the western part of the United States. That's going to bring unusually cool conditions there, as well as snow in the mountains of western Montana. And if you have a deep trough in the west, you're going to have a strong ridge in the eastern part of the United States. And that is the setup for the heat wave for next week. Now, we are seeing this cold front approaching, and we're starting to see showers and thunderstorms bubble up in a few areas. They seem to get juiced up fairly quickly up in New England this afternoon, and then there's another batch in central Pennsylvania, and there's one in between there, which we'll show you on the radar. You can still see this tropical moisture coming into South Florida. If you're north of a line, say from Fort Myers to just north of West Palm Beach northward, you're wondering what all the excitement is about. It's been all in the southern part of the state where areas have gotten 2.5 feet of rain in some cases. And we've got clouds and some showers and storms in the central Rockies and Plains, and energy is getting ready to come in to the Pacific Northwest. So if we check out the radars here in the east, you're seeing this area of thunderstorms. A severe thunderstorm warning was up for eastern Massachusetts, including Boston. That has now gone down, at least as of this time. It's coming up on 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. And you see those other two batches to the west of there, one in northern New Jersey into the Hudson Valley. Couple of stray heavy cells there, kind of a renegade little cluster, and then the area to the west in central Pennsylvania. That's the one to watch as we have some strong thunderstorms that are developing at the moment, and that area will continue to the east, and we will probably see a fairly decent squall line develop at some point as we go into tonight. Storm Prediction Center has a slight risk. They've actually expanded this a little bit to include more of central New Jersey, as well as much of Long Island, all of Connecticut, Massachusetts, up into southwest Maine, also the lower Hudson Valley, much of eastern and southern Pennsylvania, down into Maryland and northern West Virginia and southeast Ohio. The marginal risk extends further south into southern Virginia. We have a separate area of severe weather tonight expected in the western plains, eastern Colorado to western Kansas and western Nebraska, where we have a slight risk, and we also have a 2% tornado risk there. As we move through the weekend, most of the action is going to be in the plains, up in the northern plains on Saturday, as well as areas in the central and southern plains. A small two areas of slight risk being indicated: eastern Nebraska to western Iowa, the other one in eastern Montana and western North Dakota. And there are tornado risks in both of those areas, up to 5% in eastern Nebraska and into parts of Iowa. And then as we move on into Sunday, it's a marginal risk from Wyoming northeastward to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And by the way, both Saturday and Sunday, there's no thunderstorm risk at all in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic states. So that sets up for a very nice weekend. As far as rainfall is concerned, you can see there's still areas of an inch and a half plus being indicated for parts of Florida, but that's spread out over the next 7 days, and much of that is coming now. And we'll also see increasing rainfall for the south coasts of Louisiana and coastal Texas, from one end of the coast to the other, from Port Arthur to Brownsville, and areas just inland of there, in an area of 5 to 7 inches of rain being indicated. Heavy rains in the northern plains to the western Great Lakes of up to several inches, and also heavy precipitation across Montana into western North Dakota. anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a half of liquid plus. So it really is all about what's happening here in the eastern part of the in the eastern part of the United States with regards to this building ridge that we're getting into. We have this short wave that's going by today, and that short wave is rather vigorous, which is why we're seeing the enhancement of thunderstorms and the risk of severe weather. That trough moves out. Here comes the deep trough in the western part of the United States. See that upper low moving into Washington State and an upper ridge starting to build in the southeast U.S., the interior southeast U.S. That upper high builds northward up into the northeast and northern mid-Atlantic states. That's where the strongest part of that upper high is going to be, especially for the middle part of next week. So it's a lot of heat. It's going to be increasing humidity, but probably very little, if any, thunderstorm activity is going to occur next week while we're under that ridge. And then, of course, you see the deep trough in the west. Now, eventually, everything breaks down, but that's not going to happen probably until maybe next weekend. So we've got a long duration heat wave here next week of at least 5 days, Monday through Friday, where temperatures are going to be in the 90s. And I think Wednesday and Thursday, it could certainly be mid to upper 90s. That wouldn't shock me at all if somebody winds up getting to 100 degrees in the Northeast. So our front comes through. We get those storms this evening. You can see that there's a slight break in the rain and then another little surge during the day on Saturday in Florida. Meanwhile, high pressure covers the east with nice weather and low humidity through Sunday. Here comes the big heat wave, let's call it, for next week. And you can see is there's hardly any shower or thunderstorm activity as we move through Wednesday, and then going into Thursday and Friday. A real break probably will come maybe sometime next weekend. And we're also seeing some hints around the models, not just the GFS, but from some of the other models that the tropics might heat up a little bit next week, particularly in the Caribbean and maybe the Gulf of Mexico. So that's something I think that we'll talk about tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. Of course, the update on all the severe weather in the weekend and the week ahead. So be sure to tune in tonight at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time.